welcome to the Texas Talks podcast. I am your host, Brad Swale. Today I'm with Jeff Burdett, the Texas State Director of the National Federation of Independent Business, an association of small businesses in the U.S. formed to advance their interests. Mr. Burdett, how are you?
Doing great, Brad. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time. Let's start sort of with the basics, the easy stuff. I think people kind of get the idea of what the NFIB is just based on the name. I'm the son of a small business owner, and I appreciate small businesses. They're often called the backbone of the American economy. But in your own words, sort of what is it that y'all do?
So over 80 years, NFIB has been the voice of small business, and that's in all the states and in Washington, D.C. We have 21,000 members just here in Texas, and almost 300,000 when you look at us nationwide. We're a very unique organization in the fact that we have a cross-section of the economy that most business organizations don't have. We have anything from agriculture to manufacturing, IT, restaurants, you name it. And that's anywhere from a very small startup business to some company that may have been around for 100 years and is a family-owned business. But what we try to do is tie together our advocacy, our political, and our grassroots programs to ensure elected officials know who we are, what we do, and why it's important.
Yeah. So what is I got to ask, how does one define a small business? What's the average size? How big do you get when you're no longer a small business?
So as far as the definition of small business, we are small and independent business. So we represent anyone who is not a publicly owned entity. However, okay. I will tell you this. We have our average size business that we have at NFIB is between 8 and 10 employees, but 60% of our 60% of our businesses have 5 or less employees. So we really represent mostly the very smallest businesses.
Okay. So like I said, and I'm sure you've heard this too, small businesses, independent businesses being the backbone of the economy. I believe that. I think that that's true. But we often hear about, the big players, the NVIDIAs, the Apples, the Amazons, those massive employers and their stock prices. And is the Dow Jones up? Is it down? And that's a sort of a stand-in indicator of how the U.S. economy is doing. But you don't really hear any headlines about the state of small businesses, right? So can you just speak on that a little bit, how important small business and independent business is for the U.S. economy?
Well, I think you said it. Small businesses are the backbone, the lifeblood of the economy. But not only that, lifeblood and the economy locally. And so you have small businesses that really provide jobs, and you have 50% of all jobs in your community are small business jobs. You have most businesses in your community are small businesses. So they are the lifeblood. And these are the people that you see at the grocery store. These are the people that you see at church. These are the people that you see at Little League games. And so these are the folks that we should support the most.
Yeah. So what's the state of small business here in Texas? How's that going? How are they doing? I can imagine some of the problems that they're facing. I pay attention to the news, and I hear a lot of different things going on. What's going on in Texas?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about our small business economic trends report that just came out here the last couple of days. So for more than 50 years, our NFIB Research Center releases a small business economic trends report. These are released now every month. And so it's a gold standard of measurement of the small business economy. In fact, people ask us all the time about what's going on with the economy, and we can point to this report because of our large membership and our cross-section of the economy. So just on the high level, this month's Small Business Optimism Index decreased again, and it makes the 27th consecutive month that we're below the 50-year average. But interestingly, or not interestingly, depending on how you look at it, it's actually the lowest level this month since we had December 2012.
So the past 27 months, so that's 3 years and a month, right? I'm doing my math correctly. No, that's 2.5 years, about. There we go. I did my math really poorly. I'm sorry. So the lowest level in 27th consecutive month below the 50-year average. and the lowest level since December 2012. Um, so in the past 27 months, has it been just sort of going down gradually, or has it been ups and downs? I mean, it's the lowest level in 12 years almost. That sounds pretty dire.
Yeah, I think it's been mostly on the downward trend. There's been a few ups and downs, as you can imagine, with month to month. But over the last 2 years, what we're seeing is our business owners consistently point out a couple of issues that are an issue, and it's inflation and labor shortages. And 25% of our small business owners in this most recent report said that inflation was their single most important business problem. And that seems to be consistent along those lines each month. And, there's a lot of other issues in this report that you can kind of see what's making up optimism and why these businesses are not that optimistic, such as labor quality, which is still an issue out there. You can't find the qualified applicants that you need. Only a small percentage of our owners expect real sales to be higher in the next quarter, and only 11% are planning on creating jobs in the next 3 months. And as I mentioned, 37% of these owners have reported job openings that they can't fill with qualified applicants. So you've kind of got a lot of things, congealing at once that are creating this problem.
Why is there any indication as to why they can't fill those positions? I know that it seems like that's been a problem since I guess COVID started and I guess ended, however you want to phrase that. I'm not sure if it was a problem before that, but it's certainly been in the news that there's people are having trouble filling these vacancies. Is it? I don't know. I hear often that they need to raise the pay, the wages, or something like that. I don't know. Why are they having such a hard time?
I think there is a lack of employee. And you're right, after COVID, we didn't have these. If you look back at our reports prior to 2020, this wasn't an issue. There was plenty of labor, and there were people that wanted to. I think we also had a little bit of a lost couple of years in there with COVID, where people either decided not to come back to the workforce, decided to pursue education in a different field, and then there was folks that really didn't progress in their education during those times, as you know, with college or whatever, regardless, because those it wasn't really available at that time. So I think all of those things put it together just created a perfect storm of the issues that we have. And is it getting better? It doesn't seem to be. So I don't know what to look for the future.
So your optimism is a little bit. It sounds like it's a little bit low as well. I don't know if you took that survey, but
Yes, well, I'm trying to represent our companies here that the optimism is not the highest it has been for sure.
yeah. So I know what optimism means in my personal life. If I'm optimistic about something, and sort of how I act. How do small businesses act when they have low optimism like this, and how can you know I don't know the state of Texas as a legislative body improve that optimism, if at all?
Yeah, so I think just like anyone else, I mean, these businesses circle the wagons when that is, and you try to look out for what's going to be on the horizon here. And so, really, for small businesses, and it have a tax system that is lightly taxed, that has consistency, and is fair, and you will look for something that is going forward on a consistent basis as well. And so that's the really basic things that we try to do at NFIB on the state level and the federal level. And we've got some great victories that we had this last legislative session on a few of those issues.
I apologize. The you froze. There was a long freeze there, so I missed half that answer. Can you repeat it?
Remind me where we started.
um, so I know what optimism is in my personal life. When I'm optimistic, how I act, what I might do. What does that mean for small businesses when they don't have a lot of optimism for the future? How do they act, and is there something the state of Texas can do, if anything, to improve that optimism?
So I think small businesses act like you would or I would anything else. It's they circle the wagons, right? And you try to deal with what you've got in front of you, but it's very hard to predict things in the future. So for small businesses or any businesses really, what you need to have is a environment where you have low regulation, that's lightly regulated, that is consistent and is fair. And you need a tax environment that is lightly taxed, that is fair and consistent going forward. And when you don't have those things, it really makes small businesses struggle with decision making in the future. You have to be able to look out 3 months, 6 months. And what we're seeing in things like our small business economic trends report is that these businesses don't feel comfortable looking out that far due to the regulatory environment and maybe some of the things that are going to happen in politics as the year of 2024 goes on.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up the sort of the consistency of taxes and regulation and everything. I know that that's something that y'all have been focused on the past. My understanding is 6 years, so three consecutive Texas legislatures, ledges, however you want to phrase that. Y'all helped pass the Texas Regulatory Consistency Act, more commonly known as the Death Star Bill. I don't know. Can we say the Death Star Bill? Is that something that y'all have adopted with open arms? Is that an okay term to use?
I can tell you, Representative Burrows, who is the author of that, uses the Death Star bill, so I think it's probably comfortable to use that. We generally
Good.
call it, so to be more clear for our members, the Texas Regulatory Consistency Act. And it was a great bill, House Bill 2127 by Representative Burrows, Senator Creighton. And what it did was provide regulatory consistency by preempting some of the local regulation in areas where the Texas legislature or the federal government regulations were already in place. Um, it was especially hard for our businesses operating in multiple jurisdictions to navigate these complex and obviously contradictory schemes. And then just adding on to small businesses was making it very, very difficult out there. So anything you can do to help small businesses lower that regulation and lower these administrative costs is very helpful for small businesses.
Yeah. So what was the I mean, I guess there's different layers of regulation. You have federal regulation, whether it be HIPAA or something else. Texas, the state of Texas regulates as well. And then, I live in Austin, so I'll use that as an example. The city of Austin has separate regulations, and sometimes they get in trouble for those. Travis County, the county I live in, has regulations. So, what does this do? What does the Death Star bill do to sort of address all of that?
So I know the cities and some of the folks that were against this on the local levels did say that they didn't have authority. If this would pass, they wouldn't have authority to, have safety, and it would be create this whole monster. But really, what we look at is cities still retain the authority to address issues through public safety, zoning, regulatory powers that are expressly granted in the statute today. And so all we're talking about is some of the things like private employment practices that some of the big blue cities, Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, started doing, regulating hours, sick leave, wages, benefits. All of that stuff is already regulated on state and federal levels. And we didn't need a complex patchwork of additional requirements. And when you're talking about small businesses, this is really important to remember. Now, this may have been an oversight or it may be what you're intended, but the unintended consequences of this is that, if you have a large business that has 100 employees, you have a compliance department, you have a HR department, you have a legal department. When you're a small business, the owner is the HR department and the legal department and the compliance department. And all of these myriad of layers just create more and more confusion, create more and more work for these companies where they need to be running their businesses. What we need to be doing with small businesses is encouraging them to be the backbone of this economy, which they are, but also to make sure that small businesses can operate and just continue to make money. These small businesses provide that local economy with money. And you forget about that. I mean, if you're buying something online, most of that money is leaving. But these small businesses and these local economies are the ones that are really propping up a lot of the other businesses. And that money stays in circulation in that local economy.
Yeah. So the big story from the last Texas legislature, I know that the Death Star bill was certainly one of them that got a lot of attention in the media, and you addressed some of those criticisms that they had just now. So the tax cuts or the surplus budget, I think it was 33 billion or something like that. my understanding is we're going to have another almost 20 billion, I think, coming up surplus. And they're talking about tax reform again, sending some of that back to homeowners, to property taxpayers. How does that affect the small businesses? I don't know how many small businesses actually own their property. I imagine a lot of them rent, so I'm not really sure. Will the owner of the property pass those savings along? I don't know. But as far as property taxes go and the tax environment in Texas, what's happening? Are they getting a win from these reforms and the surpluses?
I think that's a very good point, Brad. So there's 18 billions in cuts to property taxes in this last legislative session. A lot of that did go to residential properties, but there was a section of that for business properties, and a lot of our businesses do own property or rent properties. But there's hopefully some of that will trickle down on the renting. But the ones that own those properties, there is going to be some effect of that will be helpful for us. I mean, we supported that. We supported Proposition 4. Glad the voters voted for that, and appreciate the legislature and governor for signing that. And then the other thing on ours was there was a franchise tax exemption that was increased from 1.2 million to 2.4 million, which is the threshold by which small business will have to start paying franchise tax. So increasing that actually opens up more small businesses that aren't going to have to pay that franchise tax now. And that was another really good benefit, we think, from this last legislative session.
Yeah. So going into the next session, I actually had a friend that owns a small business here in Austin, and he got a tax bill for, I think it's the inventory tax, which he's a gym owner, and all of a sudden he had to value all of his gym equipment and pay tax on it. And I've heard of that before, and coincidentally, I know that other businesses do it as well, but I've heard it mostly in the fitness industry. Not because only they do it. I just happen to know a lot of people in that industry. And every time I hear about it, I just think, well, why are you paying taxes on your inventory? Didn't you pay taxes when you bought the equipment? And in other cases, maybe it's whatever they're selling on their shelf or whatever. Um, what can we do about that? That seems like the state, whether at any level, is double dipping on taxes.
I'm glad you brought that up, Brad. Yes, the Texas inventory tax. So if you took a business and you turned it upside down and you shake everything out of it, everything that falls out is going to be inventory taxed. So I'm
Yeah.
talking about everything from your chairs to your desk to your computers to your file cabinets, but also the raw goods, the materials that it takes to produce whatever you're producing, and then even the end product that you're holding until you sell it. All of that is a part of the inventory tax. And so this is something that we've talked about at the legislature for a number of years, and we really hope we can get some relief on it. There's only $2,500 tax exemption for inventory tax. So as I described this, as you can imagine, not very many people are not going to pay this inventory tax, whether it's on their gym equipment, whether it's on whatever they're creating or making or food or all of that stuff, raw materials is all inventory taxed. Now that inventory tax does raise billions of dollars for the state. So that is the issue, obviously, going forward. But we would like to see if you could at least raise that tax exemption to a higher level. I think that the governor, the lieutenant governor have mentioned $100,000. Well, that would make a dent in it for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're still talking about if you're a machine parts or you do anything that's really, you have a lot of inventory that you have to hold, auto parts, things like that. You're still just paying, like you said, you've paid for the raw materials. You probably taxed on that end. You're going to end up selling whatever you sell is going to be sales tax as well. And you're in the middle paying another tax. So it's kind of a tax on tax on tax. And we think this is something that number one, it's something that all of our businesses pretty much agree that needs to go away or, be amended in some way, and that this is probably the number one issue that we've worked on and it's similar to what you're talking about. The Death Star bill is, sometimes these take a multiple session thing to happen, and so hopefully we're moving toward that as we've had that bill out there for a couple of sessions.
Yeah. So what about on the federal level? I guess there was the Trump tax cuts from 2017, I believe it was, which
That's
included
right.
a lot of small business deductions. Are those set to expire at some point? Is there momentum? I don't know. at the state level if it does get um, sunsetted or whatever to maybe pick up the slack at the state level? Is there efforts at the federal level to make it permanent? What's happening there?
Yeah, so there's a 20% small business tax deduction for pass-through companies, and that's basically anyone that's not like a C corp, it's an S corp or a sole proprietorship, partnership, those things. So that's 80% of businesses, or 80% of our businesses here in Texas. Will actually get a 20% tax increase in 2025 if this bill is not extended, or if this law is not extended by legislation that is actually working its way through Congress now. And it actually has bipartisan support. In fact, state Congressman Henry Cuellar out of Laredo is one of the primary authors on that bill. And we've got really a lot of bipartisan support in Texas, but we've got to get that across the finish line before 2025 expiration, because as I mentioned, small businesses that are already operating on a thin margin, 20% increase will kill them. And we can't have that. This is our number one issue at the federal level, and our number one issue that our businesses point to going into the end of this year and into 2025. So this is super important. I mean, I can't tell you how important it is for our businesses. It's our number one, two, and three issue this year.
I'm glad that y'all have so much focus on it. I would hate to see, that 20% increase popping up. I can only imagine the optimism index that you guys measure, what that would do if that doesn't get passed again or made permanent. Are y'all pretty hopeful that that's going to happen? Are there I don't know, anybody out there that's really fighting hard to stop that from happening? And why would
Well,
they do that?
yeah, we're very optimistic. I think, like you said, and for our Texas delegation, I feel like there's no problem here. We're going to have the support here for us in Texas on our congressional and Senate delegation. But I guess there's somewhere along the line, we've tried this for the last couple of years and we hadn't gotten anywhere, but we are hopeful that this is going to be the year and hopefully it can get done. I think it is kind of the end of the congressional term here, the end of the presidential term. And we're hoping to get it done before that, but then it could be if we have a new president or we have new congressional leaders at that point, I mean, who knows? So we've
Yeah.
really got to get that done, and we'd love to get that done this year. I can tell you that we have a bunch of the people from the states are going up to Washington, D.C. to advocate for this specific thing in June, and we're really trying to put a hard push on it.
Yeah. Is there any efforts at the state level? I know that it was Chapter 330 that expired, and they came up with another system to replace it. That's I think a little bit different, but Chapter 330 historically, for those that don't know, a business wants to relocate to Texas, and there would be tax breaks at I think it was the county level, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it
They
could be county, or I think you could do school district, some kind of local level, though.
Yeah, local level, they would get property tax abatements for so many years, and there was some calculus about how much and for how long and stuff like that. And I always thought to myself, that would be great if that's great. I'm okay with people getting tax cuts, tax breaks. I would like one too. But if I open a small business, no one's offering me a property tax cut, right? I got to pay that full price, and these big businesses moving in. I don't think that local governments and state governments are in the habit of foregoing taxes. I'm going to end up making up for those lost taxes that they're giving to the big businesses. Is there an effort in the state of Texas to maybe spread that love around a little bit?
Well, we would certainly be for spreading that love around. We don't usually go out and support these big economic development bills because they don't really help small businesses, on the front end. However, we don't oppose them either because we think that there is some adjacent help that may come with some of those. So if you have a big out of state or out of county or whatever company that comes in, can that rise some of the small businesses around their restaurants or other retail organizations because there are more people there? So that's kind of where we stand on those. I mean, would it be great to help small businesses? I think so. And I think, like you said, I mean, like we just talked about, the Texas inventory tax would probably be the best thing for small businesses.
Yeah, for sure. So looking forward to I don't know, I guess you might be starting now, or at least planning now, but come January or early next year when the 89th Texas legislature starts, it sounds like one of your priorities will be the inventory tax reform. Is there anything else that y'all will be focusing on, or anything that your members want y'all to focus on at the Texas state legislature?
Well, I think specifically the Texas inventory tax is going to be one of our priorities for sure. But I think anything we talked about earlier, which is, anything that can lower taxes on small businesses, make the tax system more fair and have it consistent going forward. And then anything on the regulatory side, which can, lower regulations or lower administrative burdens is something that we're going to look at. And also, one of the other things I keep hearing people talk about in the small business community is insurance rates. I'm not, we've consistently tried to do things on the health insurance, which has been, skyrocketing for a decade or more. But we're starting to hear a lot more on the property casualty insurance side. So your property insurance, your fleet insurance. We're hearing a lot about our small businesses that do trucking, how much that has increased as well. So these are things that we would like to look at to see if there's anything we can do to help these businesses from an insurance side.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything that can be done? You mentioned earlier the workforce issues that we're having, that small businesses are having, filling those positions. I don't know what the state could do to get people into those jobs, if anything, or maybe not get them in. That sounds like they're forcing it, but encourage it. Is there anything
Right.
the state can do?
Well, we have consistently worked with the Texas Workforce Commission and then some of the also junior colleges and community colleges in some of their workforce programs, and we support all of those. I mean, whatever you can do to help get a workforce out there that's a qualified workforce and a educated workforce is great. And so we'll continue to support anything on that level.
Okay. Well, Jeff Burdett, I really appreciate you taking the time. I want to make sure that we covered everything that we wanted to get to. Is there anything else that we missed?
I don't think so. Thank you, Brad. I think this was a great discussion, and I appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So, Jeff Burdett, the Texas State Director of the National Federation of Independent Business, I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there a website or anything that people can find out more?
Yeah, NFIB.com. You'd find out about our advocacy programs, about our grassroots programs, about some of the things we do with these reports. It's a great organization, and hopefully we can get more people involved in it. It's really important to be able to have advocacy on the state level, on the federal level, and then also connect people, connect small business owners with legislators, and talk about advocacy on specific levels.
Awesome. Well, Jeff Burdett, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.